This episode may contain language or discussions that may be offensive or triggering. Refer to the episode summary for details. Welcome to the SheConfidential podcast. My name is Charlene Ketchum, and today I'm having a really important conversation with the Executive Director and Founder of Paroled2Pride, Ms. Sharon Jones. And so thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yes.
This was,
Thank you.
Today we are going to share some enlightenment and some encouragement about how we all have a part to play in terms of how we can support and create opportunities for returning citizens. This was a topic when I ran across your company, and I can't even remember what I was doing on social media. And I ran across a post about your organization. And so then I went to the website and saw all the work you're doing. And that's something that's really near and dear to me because I worked in an organization where we had Father Support Center in St. Louis. And so we had programs and where we had a lot of our clients who were returning citizens. And I got to see firsthand, as I provided legal services to them, I got to see firsthand a lot of the challenges that they encounter as it relates to employment and housing and just even the discrimination within our own community and the Black community. And so to see an organization like yours that's focused on that, was like, okay, this is golden. I need to talk to her. Because a lot of people think that that it's irrelevant for them. Like this, they don't have any concerns to think about. Like, oh, people have done, committed crimes. Okay, whatever. I don't care about what happens after that. And so I want to open with enlightening people about why should they care about what happens to our people after they've served their time and they come home.
Well, I think a lot of times our community is really hush-hush about what goes on in the home and in the community sometimes. And we don't get the resources that other communities get when it comes to things that happen in the home that leads them to crime or doing drugs that may lead them to crime. In my situation, our home was a home of domestic violence. My mother was physically and mentally abused by my father. So my oldest brother was mentally and physically abused by him. But in that era of my mom growing up, she had 7 children. What went on in the house stayed in the house. And those women of that era believed in keeping their family together regardless. So my brother, being raised in a house where my dad is mentally and physically abusive, stabbing my mom, shooting at my mom, eventually they divorced. So when they divorced, my brother started selling drugs to feel a need to help. And we were in a very, what they call at-risk communities. I don't call at-risk. I call communities with no resources. Anything that doesn't have a resource to help it survive is at risk. That's including a plant. If you don't give a plant water, it's at risk of dying. So we were in this community with no resources, and we didn't have any type of counseling. Back then, there was no type of counseling for domestic violence or somewhere that they could go. Brother started selling drugs to help out. My mother didn't want the drug money, so he helped us by giving us the money to buy clothes and food or whatever. To bring it fast forward, as he became more of an adult, he started using drugs. He started going to prison, jail, and then coming out, and it became a revolving door. He started using drugs to suppress, I think, childhood issues that he didn't get therapy for. Eventually led him to Attica, and in Attica prison is where he was murdered by a correction officer. So for me, it was a lot of not talking about it, not talking about my brother being murdered, embarrassment, But when I first went to see my brother, my mom said, "Don't cry," because we want him to know that we're going to be okay. So every time we went to court, we were all there to show the judge he had family support. We loved him. But when came time to visit him, she didn't want us to cry. So my first time visiting him, I cried. So I felt like a failure because I was like 13 years old, and I was like, oh, he's going to be, I cried, and he kept wanting to assure me that he was going to be okay. After that, I didn't cry anymore, but I didn't even cry at his funeral. So I ended up in Mississippi, meet a guy that need a job out of prison. And I just felt, like I needed to help. And I helped him. He got a job, stayed with me 14 years, got custody of his children, got married, moved on, got his record still, and got a better job. So it's very important that our community understand that there are things that go on in the household that is not talked about, that we don't get the resources for, that sometimes lead our people to incarceration.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story.
You're welcome.
It's it's a lot, and I think, the interesting and sad thing for a lot of us is that, people, like you said, what happens in this house stays in this house.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't even shed, a lot of us, even once we're adults.
Hmm.
You keep those childhood secrets, like people take them to the grave,
Right.
even things that have
Right.
happened to them personally. And as you noted, it's going to manifest in some kind of way. Like for people, and I've been talking a lot this week about like grace and compassion. And one of the things that I'm trying to challenge myself with as a human is to see how I can maximize my compassion for others, particularly as it relates to things I don't understand or don't necessarily agree with. Because if I can expand my compassion for things that I don't understand, then imagine how much I can give to the people who are nearest to me or the people who need it the most. And I think it's really important because, as you said, we don't know what happened in people's houses. And we don't know what they're keeping to themselves. What's, quiet as it's kept. That's what we do, but it's going to manifest in some way. For some people, they end up in the streets and caught up with consuming drugs or selling drugs. For other people, they don't treat themselves well by shopping too much or eating too much or overworking. Like trauma is going to come out some kind of way. And it
Hmm.
sounds like maybe, and not to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like what you're kind of alluding to are just the effects of trauma.
Yes. I think, according to the CDC, they saying from 0 to 17, that kid that had an adverse experience, that it will lead them to drugs or in prison. So this is the same organization that tell us cover up for COVID. And we pay more attention to that than we pay to these adverse kids that are at risk in communities. Like when there's shootings, we don't get therapy, but if there's shooting somewhere, immediately outside of our community, they have counselors there. They have every resource available to those children to make sure that they get through that trauma without becoming at risk like we are. Do you
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying? So I
Mm-hmm.
have a son that I adopted. He's 8. I adopted him at 4 months. His mom came through my program. She had 7 children. No one really talked to her. She started going to prison at a very young age, started having children at a young age. And I'm in the state of Mississippi. But even in
Okay.
New York, wherever you go, there is not, the judicial system do not pay attention to, okay, or even the school. We fail each other. We fail each other in the community. We fail in the school. DHS sometimes fail us. We never find out, okay, why is this young lady having children at this young age? What could be going on in the home? Why is she missing school? With the community, if the community failed, then the school have total access to this child. Those are some things they should notice. What's going on with this child? She's pregnant at a young age. She's not going to school. She dropped out. Like with my brother, when he went into prison, or before he went, nobody wanted to know what was going on with him in the
Mm-hmm.
home to prevent him from even going to prison. So
Yeah.
our community need to pay more attention to our community. We understand each other. I
Yeah.
mean, you have other resources that come in and different ethnic groups that come in, but do you understand the culture? Do you understand our background? Do you understand our struggle? Those things that will absolutely help us to overcome whatever adversity we're in. And it takes us to do that with each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And I appreciate that you pointed out, you know, we often defer to others to come in and help
Right.
us resolve our problems. And I'm not saying that there's not a space and a time for
Right.
collaboration, but at the end of the
Hmm.
day, we have a shared history and we have a shared trauma. We have a shared collective trauma that started way before now. And we have the biggest investment to seeing our kids like heal. And so that's the other thing. Even so, what do you, how do you suggest that people do more to pay attention? Because, you know, in this day and age, like I'm 40, to think about it, how old am I? I'm 41. And so when I was younger, our neighbors actually did look out for kids. My teachers, they would make home visits. The teachers would. And people at the worked at the corner store, because back then we had still a lot of black businesses in our neighborhoods. That was before a lot of other people started coming in. And so they would know, they knew you. If you were supposed to, like, I was supposed to go straight home when I got off that bus stop. I wasn't even supposed to stop at the corner store. And if I did, they knew it. And they're like, you supposed to be at home, aren't you? My neighbor next door, if I'm standing outside talking to my friend, she's like, now you know you're supposed to be in the house because your mama's at work. But we don't have that type of network anymore because everybody's kind of doing their own thing in their own home. So how do you suggest we actually look out for our kids when everybody is so separated and we not talking about the issues?
Well, I'm in the state of Mississippi where the state of Mississippi is one of the states that have like a high population in incarceration.
Yes.
It's 12 states and Mississippi being one. And I'm originally from New York, so this is my mother's hometown. I make myself available. Like the my when I started the organization, it was because I was in the community, kind of knowing who was coming out of prison, and I had a very good job. You know, I was an operational manager of in the hospitality industry. The gentleman that I worked for owned several businesses. He allowed me the opportunity to hire this gentleman, even though he had his doubts. He thought that it was not going to work. So he had already stereotyped what type of outcome it was going to be with him. But I was in the community, and I'm not afraid to talk to a kid. You know, I'm not afraid to talk to a mom. You know, we can't live in fear and we can't look at each other as a threat. And I'm not saying that some of us need help because we're angry and we take it out on each other. But like you said, if you open up your heart of compassion and you notice a child or you notice a parent, go, don't be afraid to talk to them. We have to make sure that we don't live in fear of each other. The media portrays us as being as violent towards one another more than anything, you know, and
Yeah.
that creates a fear. So I really don't do media determination of us. Statistics. I think statistics can be altered because some of the people you talk to that's in our same position
Yeah.
don't even, don't even do any type of statistics with them. So you can do statistics, but is your statistics correct? So I think it has to do with us not fearing each other and not looking at each other competitively. Because I had did one interview and they said, well, with all this competition, I said, well, I don't have competition. I have resources. I can't help
Mm,
everybody. So
boom.
if there's another
Yeah.
organization and they have a reentry program,
Hmm.
if I can't assist you, then guess what? I'm going to refer you. I don't live in fear for each other because you become a resource to me. So when we start looking at
Yeah.
each other and supporting one another, and if you can't do it in the community, then the school. You have children to go to school every single day. My brother was one, and we didn't have the proper resources. You teachers noticed that back when we were growing up.
Yeah.
They need to notice that now. Like, okay,
Hmm.
why is this child sleeping in classroom? Why is this child so hungry? What's going on? So if they don't have, you can look at their clothing and see
Yeah.
if their clothing are clean, if they're ironed. So you won't drive them out there to the corner thinking, okay, if I sell drugs or if I commit a crime, I can get clean clothes, find out what's going on. And then give those homes, one thing that I'm really big on is livable wages. You don't want to give nobody wages enough to pay the rent if they
Yep.
on HUD, pay the light bill, and you're giving them food stamps and they have no type of vacation, no other fund money to do anything else with their child to expose them to something different. So that plays an important part. And buy back our community. Buy back our community. We arrive when we start making six figures, or we make this money. We move out to move out of the community that we were raised in, and now they're gentrifying some of these communities. And now you got people going into our community buying homes that we grew up in, and they redoing them and moving
Yep.
in there themselves. So buy back our community and make our community beautiful for those children that don't have access to what we now have access to,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yes. You just gave a whole sermon. I mean, and you touched what I love is you touched on everything. Like you talked about like the community outreach, because a lot of times the only time we pay attention or talk to the kids is when we're criticizing them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just keep it real, and I'm a very self-reflective person. I remember a few years ago, and I can remember so much madness has happened. But I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and so there was a lot of when Mike Brown was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
We had the riots and everything in Ferguson. There was a lot of stuff that went down in Ferguson, and I remember I was really frustrated one day because I'm like, okay, we're doing these things in our own neighborhoods. And at the time, I couldn't separate like my frustration from the entire situation to understand like the frustration of these young people. And
Mm-hmm.
plus, and let me add this as an aside, a lot of that stuff that happens is not our people doing it. There's agitators who come in and do those things, but that's a whole nother topic. But I didn't take a minute to understand like when people feel hopeless and they have all this rage at being unseen, like you said, nobody's providing resources for these kids. We don't know what's happening in their homes. We don't know how they're being neglected, not just by the people in their homes, but maybe at school. And I know that there's a lot of amazing teachers who are bringing clothes for the
Yes.
kids, who are bringing food for the kids, who are pulling money out of their own pockets, and they have limited resources, but the system is not working collectively, and we're not working collectively to support these kids. And so when you feel like, because I worked with kids, and when you hear kids say, people think I'm nothing, like I had a child as young as 12 tell me that at
Mm-hmm.
12, you already think you're nothing because the world has told you that. And so that's going to lead to a lot of rage. So when
Right.
something happens and my voice is not being heard, guess what? I'm gonna tear some shit up because I'm
Mm-hmm.
angry, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody's taught me how to process it. Nobody's taught me how to work through that. And when I got more education and understanding, and that came from having those conversations that you mentioned, the more I started actually talking to young people and understanding what they were going through, I understood like that's why that's happening. That's why that's happening. And so I think that we have to get to a point as a people where we reclaim our humanity, because we cannot say that this is behavior I would engage in, but we also have to recognize we have a privilege to be able to discern what what we need to be doing. We've got the privilege to be able to get those resources. We've had the privilege to be able to heal and reflect, but we also need to be able to extend some compassion. And at first, like you said, try to understand, why did that kid do that? Kids are not born bad.
Right.
It's
Right.
these situations, these traumas that transform them. And a lot of these kids, they actually don't think they matter.
Mm-hmm.
They
And they're
really
looking for
don't.
love. Who you and I adults, we know. You could think of that one teacher that I know. I
Yeah.
remember Miss Baker. She loved me. You know what I'm saying? I knew
Yes.
that was sincere. And she
Yep.
understood. She could look at me and
Mhm.
tell things were going on. And she didn't
Mhm.
really bring that out, but she did it in such a way that I knew that Miss Baker loved me. We
Mhm.
need to see us. I have so many different friends from different backgrounds. We need to stop
Yep.
judging each other by how we vote, how we look, what we wear. That's not important. What who I vote for is not important to what's important to my community. And so when we
Mhm.
go, when we, and then as people start running for mayors and councilmen, let's not forget the reason why you got in that seat. Don't get in the seat and forget why you're there. If you're there for the betterment of the community, what you said, don't use that seat so you can elevate yourself and be somebody. Don't forget about the community. I raised my daughters. I said, when God bless you to succeed, don't forget about your community. Go put something there. I don't care. Go put
Mhm.
a after school center. Do
Yeah.
something to make sure that you give back to your community. And a lot of times we don't. And we can't even, to be honest with you, before I got into this organization, I didn't think about a lot of legal things or reparations or stuff like that. There's
Yeah.
no way that Black people can ever come up unless we have reparations. You have to give it to us. There's no way. You could give us the same wage that you,
Yeah.
this has been over 400 years that we've been behind. So giving me the same wages as you getting is not going to bring me forward, you know?
Mm-mm.
So, and we need to actually touch on history. Like a lot of times we don't, how can we heal if we're not talking about history? My
Yeah.
son needs to see successful Black men.
Yes.
I live in a community, very good community where I'm buying a home. I love my white friends. They are phenomenal.
Hmm.
But when he had to get therapy, he said to me, "Is it someone that looks like me?" I said, "Oh, we will find someone to look like you." And I researched that and I found resilience in Jackson. And that guy, his staff was Black. So my son can understand, you can relate. His mother was in prison. He
Hmm.
knows some of this stuff. He knows how his mother, but he's here with me. And so he's trying to sort out who he is. So he needs somebody to understand him as a
Yeah.
Black boy.
Yes.
So no offense to, other ethnic groups. They're
Hmm.
phenomenal. But when
Yeah.
it comes to our community, we need representation. We have to
Yes.
have representation. Because for my son or for us, I'll say for me, we saw that they were easy to get resources or it was easy for them to do certain things. But if you bring me a
Yep.
sister that's giving me therapy, said, "Listen, girl,
Mm.
I've been there. I did that. I
Yep.
came from this
Yep.
community," then that means you can
Yes.
relate.
Yeah. And you understand it, like it just hit different when you have
Yes.
somebody that for one thing that just looks like you. And I'm so happy that you brought up how the lens of it through your son's eyes and
Hmm.
everything, because when I think about as a child like you, I had teachers who loved on me, who I didn't. And it was interesting because I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and all the way up until high school I was in predominantly Black schools, so I had Black teachers. And then in high school, I was in the desegregation program, which allowed us to bus out to the county school. Here is like in the city, the urban area, you've
Hmm.
got more predominantly Black schools, and that's also the areas that you see higher crime, higher rates of poverty, and the schools don't get the resources or the
Right.
support that the higher income schools get. And so what they started doing was having these programs where it was supposed to be like an exchange of students, but they don't come to our schools. We would go out to theirs, and it was a good thing for us in theory because we got access to more resources. But I have to say, and everybody's experience is different. But for me, having come from spending all of my education in environments where I had Black teachers who understood me, who what wasn't covered in those textbooks, they still gave it to us. I
Hmm.
knew my history because I had Black teachers.
Hmm.
Went out there completely different. I never had a teacher that I felt like loved me and connected with me. And a lot of it may have also just been because they didn't look like me. I'm sure there were some amazing and really nice people
I agree.
there,
I agree.
but I needed to see teachers who looked like me and who understood where I was coming from and not feel like you're either pitying me or you're judging me. It just is very important for you to have that, especially in those formative years, because it's real hard to repair that damage that these adults inflict on kids every day.
And then we don't, when they go to prison, like with my brother, my mom, she was an amazing lady. When I started this organization in 2007, she actually up us made it a nonprofit. Started it a little bit in the 90s. She laid the curriculum, and in 2007, when she passed, I had set the organization down. I was like, oh, because that was my greatest supporter. In 2016, when I picked it back up, I said, I'm going to pick this up full force, Lord, with my mom and my brother's spirit, striving to do things better. When my brother went to prison, when he went before the judge, I remember her bringing all of us there just to
Yeah.
show this judge he got a loving family, you know. But they didn't, they weren't concerned about that. They were more concerned about the crime than the individual, you know.
Yeah.
And he was a user too. So they didn't, why would somebody shoot heroin in their arm if they're not dealing with something? Why would you
Yeah.
get a mother smoking crack if they're trying to suppress some type of pain? Everybody have a
Hmm.
different cope mechanism. So
Yes.
when I started this program, I met a girl, her son went to jail over $600 worth of crack. You know how much time he spent in prison? 10 years. 16 years old. Met another girl, 15 years old, that came through the program. 15 years in prison. 15. She was 15 years old when she was acting out. Nobody, when she tells her story, when I meet them, I always ask, well, how was your childhood? That's where you hear it all
Yeah.
began, that causes them to make certain decisions. I met another gentleman. He was 13 here in the state of Mississippi when he got arrested. And I have his video. He was tried as an adult. He said, my mother was on crack. My daddy was on crack. His grandmother was raising him. And this Mississippi poverty. So his
Yeah.
grandmother raising him. And so he said he started selling just to get
Yeah.
clothing, not to be teased. That led him to incarceration. And he got out of prison at 32 and he's back again because he went to selling again. But if that's all he knew, you're not giving him no type of therapy. You just send these
Yeah.
guys out here back into their same community and say, oh, you better not be around any drug dealers or any type of person that's a felon. Okay. Then you have restitution. Some of them have probation fees. So you
Hmm.
paying a minimum wage and saying you need, if you miss your restitution or your probation fee, that's why I pay that for 3 months. And so one guy sent me an email, or I think on Instagram. So what are you saying? You give them a loan for restitution and probation? No, I don't give them a loan. We pay their fees for 3 months. So they don't have to worry about if somebody going to come arrest them because
Hmm.
they haven't paid probation fees, which they say, they're passing where they can't because of that. But still, just to have that weight
Right.
off of you. And then I fight with employers about paying them. Paying them. If you get a good service for somebody, pay them what they're worth. You're making money,
Exactly.
pay them. So,
Yeah. And I appreciate that you highlighted, and I want you to even, I mean, just, I want to spend a little minute to linger on that, because a lot of people don't recognize that when people come home, like they've served their time, but they're still being punished
mhm,
when they come home. And a lot of people might say, well, oh, well, you did this. That's, you put yourself in that situation, but they don't understand how that contributes to recidivism and how that prevents them from making progress, how that's really a barrier. And so I wanted to go deeper into that for a second. But before I do that, I want to connect, like, we spent a lot of time talking about kids. And so people who might be listening or watching might think, well, why are they talking about kids? I thought we're talking about, adults who have been incarcerated and who are released. I thought that was the focus. Well, I want to make sure I can connect the dots for folks. The reason we spent a lot of time talking about kids is because most of it starts in childhood.
right.
And so that's really important. And that's why it's so important for us as adults and for those of us who have more resources to be able to identify ways that we can help support programs and initiatives with that help our children, and to be more engaged with the children that are in our lives or in our communities, because you know healthy adults were probably kids who had those resources and support,
Hmm. Hmm.
and we have to make sure that we start helping them have that. And the other thing that you mentioned that I want to emphasize for folks is when we talk about providing support or being involved in your community, that's going to look different for everybody because everybody has a different capacity.
Hmm.
So for some people, you may actually become a foster parent. You may adopt. You may volunteer at the school. A lot of schools will allow people to do that. You may volunteer at a community center or something, giving your time. For
Mhm.
some people, they may not have time to give, or that may not be their capacity, but you may have money. All of these organizations
Yes.
need money,
Right.
so you can give your money.
Mhm.
Even if you do something like Big Brothers Big Sisters, I've done that. Or if you informally mentor,
Mhm.
I do that.
Mhm.
Like, all of those things can make a difference. So, I don't want people to hear it and think, okay, I have to do this particular thing. I got to go outside and like meet the kids in my neighborhood. That may not be for you,
Right.
but you can help in some way.
Right. Everybody has a different gift. The reason I talk about children and lead up to the adults, because that's what they deal with when they're in prison. When they come out and you talk to them literally and you ask them how was their childhood, you understand why they did some of the stuff
Yeah.
they did. And the adults that come out, they're, if depending on how long they've been in prison, guess what? There's a fear of them when they come out, because they fearing like, am I going to be able to adapt to the change in society? What I love about
Yeah.
how my mother articulated or helped me articulate this organization is that when they come home, I train them in the front desk with real people. Like I said, that person on the other side of the counter don't even know you've been to prison. They don't know your background. They know nothing about you. Here's your opportunity to regroom yourself. And when they do that, I said, you don't have to be fearful. You're learning, you're in training. Then they have access to all different ethnic groups. Some of them have never been around Chinese people or white people, or you know what I'm saying? We take for
Yeah.
granted that, we have
Yeah.
this diversity that we've been around, but some of them have not. So now
Yeah.
you're at the desk and you can redefine yourself. And if that's not for you, then we can find something that may be more up your alley. Some of them ended up being beauticians, some of them opened their own business. So it just depends on the individual. So that's the reason we talk about the childhood, because that's crucial in reforming the judicial system. They always talk criminal justice reform. What can we do to reduce recidivism? Okay, let's start there in the home. Let's start
Yeah.
with the making things available to those children. And then when people have served their time, there was one young lady, she had murdered someone and she did 10 years. So when she got out, she did an application and, I talked to her. And I always say, nonviolent felon, but you really have to judge that case by case also. So when she
Yeah.
got out, I ended up talking to her and I said, murder. And she was like, she was ashamed of it.
Yeah.
So she told me the story. I said, I remember that because it made the news. She was at a club. She got the fighting. Someone jumped, the girls jumped her. She pulled out a knife. I know she didn't mean to kill the girl because she was being jumped. I didn't
She was
understand why it
defending
wasn't,
herself.
self defense, but I told her, she was crying. I said, girl, I cried too. I said, I'm good with that. And I gave her an opportunity. And she left
Yeah.
shortly after, but they said that she's doing well somewhere else. But just giving her that one opportunity to let her know, I heard the
Yeah.
story and I know that you're remorseful for that. So
Yeah.
we have to really understand that if you give them an opportunity, if employers, that's an untouched workforce right there. You see all these help warning signs out? Okay. Start revamping who you hire. Stop looking for people with experience. Stop looking for people that don't have a good
Yeah.
criminal background, and kind of tap into that workforce, and you might get the best employee that you could ever have. My
Yeah.
boss that I work for,
And I want to talk about that.
he
Yeah.
actually,
So what are some things that employers can do to have more inclusive hiring practices and in more inclusive environments? Because some of them they might do say, well, okay, we've got programs and we really want to have people, we want to collaborate with reentry programs, but are there actual practices in their workplace inclusive as well? So what are some things that employers need to do or can do to for the recruitment point and the hiring part and for inclusivity once they actually hire them?
I think this first they can start with some reentry. There's some really good reentry programs out here that do real good training. What we actually do, and everybody is different, what we do, we train them where I am, and I start reaching out to different employers to say, hey, I got this person that's looking for work. They train with me. That actually gives them a reference. Once you, and then what human resource departments can do is actually, whoever the human resource person is, they can sit down with that individual and let that individual get a feel of that person. When I sit down with them and they tell me, what they did, I give them an opportunity to express themselves. Like, if they said, well, I made a mistake, and I always say, well, you didn't make a mistake. You chose to break the law. Let's say it that way. But I tell them in the interview, you said, listen, I chose to do things outside of the law. I paid my debt to society. I'm trying to really get myself together where I can be a productive citizen in the community. However, they can express that to them, no better voice than to hear it from them. I can go in and talk to the employer, and sometimes I do, but I'll tell the employer, talk to them and let them talk about, or whatever questions you want to ask them where they can answer. Nobody can give you the answer better than them. So you have to be open, and you have to understand where they're coming from when they talk about they committed a crime, and not be judgmental. Because to be honest with you, it was one gentleman that I had brought to here. His name is Tracy Seifetz from the block to the boardroom. Phenomenal guy. He made this comment at one of the events that we had. All of us have broken the law at one time or another, just never got caught. Whether it
Yep.
was running a red light, drinking while driving, you know, picking up something you weren't
Driving
supposed.
tipsy.
Yeah, see, all of us have. It's just some people got
Mm-hmm.
caught, and some people went to the extreme because of what they have gone through. So I think the
Yep.
CDC, the Adverse Childhood Experience, I think we need to look more into that,
Yeah.
so that way we can better
Yes.
understand those when they're coming out, and that will help us to help them, and then help society reduce recidivism. I want to talk about this one guy, Bobby Black. I think that's his last name. I hope I'm getting it right. He's on Instagram. He was a kid. His mother started having children at a young age. I read his book, and he started mother dating, so it was a revolving door, boyfriends and stuff. Mother was drinking, so he ended up getting with the wrong crowd or whatever, and started stealing and doing things that he shouldn't have done. He went before a judge at the age of, I think, 16, 17. Black judge. That's why I said we need not to forget while we on this bench and we setting sentences. Made an example of him and gave him 241 years at the age of 16.
What was he charged with?
Robbery, repetitive. He robbed he robbed some people coming into the community for Christmas gifts, and he robbed them, and I guess he had a weapon. But 241 years is what she sentenced him to. And then she turned around after that. She's his advocate to get him out, because she knows she made a mistake. Because I think in the book he was saying that they said that she was so lenient on crime, and so she needed to make an example. So you made the example out of him and gave him 241 years.
And I wonder if she was elected. So see, and that's something else that I really like to try to highlight for people, like how we have a responsibility as citizens to make sure we are engaged in these elections, because she probably was a judge who was going to be elected. And, these people, when it's campaigning time,
Mhm.
they look at your sentence. And I mean, and we really, it's a lot of folks, we need to be voting
All
out.
right.
But the reverse will happen. They'll look and say, oh, this person is lenient. And I try to tell people it's really hard when you just like look up a judge's individual record and you see, well, how many convictions and things they have. You got to dig a little bit deeper than that
Mhm.
and look at the details, because somebody will hear that case and say, well, he should have gone to jail. He did crime, but no, look at the facts of it.
Right.
Really, 200 plus, that's excessive.
Right.
Let's look. Do we look at his childhood history?
Mhm.
Do we all these different things? So you got to look a little bit deeper, but it's on us as well as citizens. We got to be more engaged because it's a lot of people who are making decisions about our lives and our kids' lives that
Don't have a clue.
we these folks keep getting in office because we're not voting them out or we're not voting them in,
Mhm.
or you have people who are trying to run for office. And the unfortunate thing, it sickens me how much money is spent on
Right.
campaigning. But the reality is, it costs money.
Mhm.
And you have to be able to raise that money. And so we got a lot of amazing people out here who are doing the work, but they can't raise the money.
Mhm.
And so they can't get in these roles where they can actually make the decisions. And so we got to do better as a people of being informed, getting informed, and I know it's hard. Everybody's busy. We are juggling so much and we are all carrying a lot of things individually, but there are resources. Google can be your friend.
Right.
Like,
That's right.
look, how to look up judge voting
Right.
records. Talk to your friends,
Mhm.
talk to people in your community, call your council person, ask them, like, where can I find these resources and everything?
Mhm.
Find those resources because somebody else is already compiling that information. You might need to go a little bit deeper and ask some particular questions, but somebody else has already started the work. Find out, make sure you're voting and vote and quit voting, y'all. Don't just vote somebody in to keep them just because they're black
Mm-mm. I'm with
or
you.
just because they're
Yes.
in alignment with your party. All skin folk ain't kin
That's
folk.
right.
So it's like,
That's it.
look and see what they're doing. Vote these people in or out. Help support people who are trying to run for office that actually represent your interests, your people's
Mhm.
interests, and talk to your other folks. Like, we got to start having those conversations in our circles. And when these people get in office, we have to remind them who put them there and why.
Right. I totally agree. Bobby will be out, I guess, in November. Now he's 40 years old. Can you imagine? He's been in there that long. He's 40 years old. So just imagine he cell phone. We had one guy that spent 20 years in prison. He didn't even know how to use a cell phone. You know,
Yeah.
we exposed him to a fine clothing store here. So sometimes I buy clothing and I said, come on, let's go in this store. And he's like, I can't afford this store. I said, honey, nobody in here knows if we can afford this store or not. You do just like they do. Some of them can't afford it, but they're here. We're going to walk right to this
Hmm.
clearance rack and see what they have and get some quality
Okay.
clothes, you know? So that changed his whole
Yeah.
perspective. Nobody in here knows that you can't afford it. And you're looking at them like they
Yeah.
can, and they probably can't. So
Hmm.
Bobby's coming out. What do we have? Even though they get their degrees in prison, all of that is good until you
Yeah.
get out here in the real world and you have to deal with
Yeah.
real life issues that are different
Yeah.
than it was in prison. So some of them that come out that's been in for 15, 20 years, they feel no hope. They feel like, okay, I'm better back in there because
Yeah.
housing. One girl, we went to get
Hmm.
her an apartment, and I'm very cautious about where I do applications for them because I don't want to put them back in the same place that they came from. So she did the application. She was so upset. She was like, "What am I put it? Ask was I a convicted felon?" I said, "Honey, leave it blank." I said, and when they pull it up, you'll be able to tell them yourself. So they never pulled it up. So she got the apartment. So then when she went to get her business, she was like, "Well, Miss Sharon, now she has matured. I want to tell them about my background." I said, "Well, tell them, but first tell them about your successes." Said, "Yeah, I do have a criminal background, but I lived in this apartment and I had this job and I'm doing this. So I am evolving into a productive citizen. So that way they won't prevent you from doing what you need to do." And they let her have the building for her to open her business for her hair. So you have to we have to deal realistic, but we also have to allow them the opportunity to redeem themselves, not us redeem.
Yeah.
They want to redeem themselves. Most of them
Hmm.
say, "Hey, I want to do better."
Yeah. So how do we as individuals help support folks when they come home for our returning citizens? How do we help support them and our families? How do I mean, I know people, we throw parties and we'll give people money, but a lot of times, like the things that you just highlighted, people don't think about how the world may have changed from when they went in to
Mm-hmm.
now, and who they may have lost. Because I know people who were incarcerated, they lost
Right.
parents while they were
Mm-hmm.
incarcerated. And then they have to come back to a world where this person is gone and now the entire family dynamic has shifted. So, what kind of support do we offer as a community and as families to people?
I think as families, like the young lady that I was talking about, she is 15 years back. So some things that she does is kind of childish to me for the age she is. At 30, you kind of like maturing. Well, we judge
Yeah.
that, instead of allowing her to get that out of her system. If we can provide therapy, if we can provide clothing, if you're a manager at an apartment, make sure that if they're working, try to help them have a place to stay. Talk to them if they have a criminal background. The gentleman that I work for, he was my number one funder when it came to therapy, when it came to clothing, when it came to paying restitution and probation fees, he became a voice to his community. He was Indian descent. And so he became that voice that said, listen, give these people an opportunity because they had made him so successful by being his employee. So we need to be a voice for them. If we're in position of human resources, management, if we are in the community as counselors, we need to make ourselves available. Like you said, everybody does something different. I'm not doing youth because that's not. I have my son, so everybody think, okay, she adopted her son. She loved the youth. I do love the youth, but I like dealing more with adults because I understand what my brother had to go through coming out. He wasn't judged by the person that was coming out. He was always held to criminal activity, so he never could really overcome that, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure resources are in the community. And if you have a reentry program in the community, whatever your gift or talent is, go to them and say, hey, how can I assist you? How can I volunteer? What do you need me to do? Just like you said, do you need me to? We feed once every other month. We buy clothing. Donations are good. If you have a reputable organization, and I'm not saying just give your money to anybody, make sure the organization is reputable. If you have to do your research on the organization, donations will help. Your time will help. And that way we can help the community. God give everybody a gift and talent. Your talent is to provide a platform for people. That's phenomenal. That's a gift God gave you. That must have been a passion that you say, you know what? I'm going to give these people a
Yeah.
platform. Your platform to give people
Yeah.
the opportunity to share. That's your gift. Whatever your gift or talent is, whatever you're passionate about, you can connect with some resource person in the community to help those returning citizens that's coming out. And not only that, there's one young lady that I partner with, Silo Incorporated in Columbus, Mississippi. Phenomenal lady. She helps the family because the people are incarcerated. So her passion is, I need to help the family. Like, do you need to use my computer? Do you need to use my phone? She has a place where they can come and talk to her and where she can provide resources for them like food. She asks for canned goods to give the family food because we understand that the family is going through something too. If it's the father or the mom, like my son, so I mean, my son, he has 6 siblings. So the grandmother was doing this as a single person. So what I did, I said, you know what, I can't get all of
Mm.
them, but at Christmas time, we went out and brought all the kids' toys from their brother. So it's so
Yeah.
much that you can do in the community to let people see that
Yeah.
we care about our community.
Yeah. Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I wanna make sure people know what Parole to Pride does. So how do people get involved? Like how do your clients find you? And what are the services that you
They
offer?
normally find me by word of mouth. Somebody tells somebody, and it just went from there. But they can find me parole2pride.org. We actually have been blessed to go do job fairs in different prisons, so that actually give an opportunity for people to find out about us. Um, Once they do the application themselves, we don't want your mom, your cousin, your sister, your daughter, your brother, the next door neighbor. We want you to do the application because this is something you have to want to do. And once they do the application,
Yes.
sometimes we take them through a training process where they're not working, and then most of the time I do on the job training. That way they can get paid and they can get certification. They take the course and they get accredited certificates from the American Hotel Educational Lodging Institute, which is a certifying body for the hospitality
Mm-hmm.
industry. But we have been blessed to actually maybe partner with Google, and Google has some digital scholarships, IT programs that they have that they can take, and they'll get scholarship, and they have like 150, they said, employers that want to employ these people once they go through the program. So that's another thing. So we're praying that this go through, and if it does, this is more where they can kind of decide. Well, if I don't want to do the hospitality industry, I like to do some IT work. They can take courses for that and get scholarships. I have a sister in Atlanta. She has a nonprofit. This is so amazing. She has Divas of Hope. She deal with at-risk kids because she felt my
Mm.
brothers. I have another brother that spent time in Rikers Island. I have a nephew that did 8 years, but he came out. He learned a trade. He opened an eyeglass place. He has his own business. He's doing phenomenal. So she felt the need that though that like from I guess high school age, junior high, high school, that they needed help. So she opened hers. And then I have a
Mm-hmm.
sister in Fayetteville, North Carolina that has a nonprofit called Tap Teen Alcohol Prevention. But we all did this, and then we realized we're working in the field. Do you know what I mean? So it was like kind of like, okay, we all have nonprofits.
Wow, that's
Yeah, so
amazing.
if I didn't shout
Wow.
them out, they would be totally upset with me. So
Yes. And I'll look up their websites and I'll have all the links to all these organizations because thank you so much. Like I love when people share the resources and their partners and just because, people always say, well, nobody's out there. There's nobody doing this. No,
oh, they
they
are.
they are out
Yeah.
there. Like
There's another.
Parole to Pride is out
Yeah.
there. You just named over five other
We have Silo
organizations.
Incorporated here. We
Yeah.
have Mississippi Center for Reentry in South Haven, Mississippi. So that's three organizations right there. So when somebody called me and said my brother or sister's coming home, and I'm like, well, where are they going to? If they tell me they're going to Memphis, then I say, hey, this reentry person is there because South Haven and Memphis is so close together. Or if you have family that say, my sibling or my husband is in prison and we need help out here. Well, hey, we have Silo Incorporated that will be
Hmm.
more than glad to help you. Or if they said that they're going to Atlanta,
Hmm.
then I say, hey, you contact my sister in Atlanta and she'll find a resource for you. So when you're looking at it as competition, you cannot provide the resources that they need. Be the resource. Nobody's competing. At least we're not out here.
Yeah.
People make us, like the statement the lady made, you have a lot of competitors. No, I don't. I don't know who's competing because I want to know what you have so you can become a vital resource for me.
Yeah. Yeah. At the end of the day, we all trying to help our people.
Yes,
We trying to
yes,
serve.
yes. That's it.
There's no competition in
Mm-mm.
serving.
Not in serving.
So
Not in
no,
serving.
no. How can people support Parole to Pride?
They can support Parole to Pride by volunteering. Lord, we can use some volunteers by donations. And when I said donations, when we were going through growing up, people donated what they didn't want. I look at what you're donating. We're asking you to donate something that you would want.
Right.
That's when you're really donating. Don't give
Yes.
me nothing you didn't want.
Cleaning out your
Yeah,
shed and all that stuff. It's like
I don't
y'all
want
that
that.
mm-mm.
We really love them to actually, I purchase stuff. So I'll go and purchase things.
Yes.
So they have brand new stuff. If you can, that's fine. But if not, we're asking you, if you do purchase something that they would want to have, something you would want to wear. And if you're giving something, give something that you would want to wear. And we
Mhm.
ask for funding. Funding is always good because we pay the restitution. We try to help them pay the deposit on their apartments, or if they need a deposit for their life. Those little things that can take a little weight off of them to kind of
Yeah.
give them a head start. All of
Hmm.
those ways are good. And even sharing our information is a way to help Parole to Pride.
Okay, wonderful. And can you share your website again? And I'll have all these links again, y'all. For those who watch or listen regularly, they know all the info is in the description box. But just for people who are listening and ready to go to your website or your social media, can you share that info?
We're parole2pride.org. That's our website. We're Parole to Pride on Instagram. We're Parole to Pride on Twitter. Parole to Pride 2 on Twitter. Anywhere that you put Parole to Pride, Facebook, that's who we are, Parole to Pride. And I want to say what Parole to Pride means, if I can. A lot of times I don't
Absolutely.
get to say that. A lot of times when we hear words, we go with the first meaning of a word. So when somebody said, I've been paroled, the first thing we think of is, oh, they're out of prison. Well, if we don't look up definitions, we don't understand that words have many definitions sometimes. So when I got the name, God gave me this name, and I looked up the word paroled, it means to lay down your arms of war and lift up another means of living. So if your war was drugs, we want you to lay that down and we want you to pick something else up. Work ethics, education, whatever it is you want to do. And pride also, we're not talking about the pride, haughty pride, your civic duty. Pride also means civic duty. So we want you to lay down your arms of war, pick up another means of living, because that is your civic duty once you come out of prison. So that's
I
the meaning of
love
parole to
that.
pride. Yeah.
I love that. I
I
love
did too.
that.
When God gave it to me, I was like,
Oh
parole
my
to pride.
goodness.
But then when he said, look up the meaning, and I looked it up, he said, that's your meaning. I was like, I love it.
Dropping
Yes,
gems.
yes,
Yes. Because you
yes,
were obedient. When we're, I
yes.
mean, the thing, when we are obedient,
I
yeah.
think if somebody was there for my brother, even when my mother passed, she left me money to go on, but it didn't. My brother's life put me here. And when it first happened, blamed my father. I blamed the judicial system. I blamed the community. I just, really blamed everybody. And God really healed me of that. I had to forgive my father. I had to understand that the judicial system wasn't the one that really took the person that took my brother's life,
Hmm.
that correction officer. I had to forgive him. And I had to really open up to say, you know what? Our community has persevered through so much, the struggle
Hmm.
when they did the 3 time, you commit a crime 3 times. My brother, he just didn't have a chance, and nobody got to know him. We knew him. We're a product of him. He used to tell me, go to school, get your education. Don't let people drip you out your money. Learn how to count. He used to tell us, tell your brother don't come to jail or I'm going to kill him. Tell him to stay out of jail. So he knew, but he wrestled on the inside with no therapy, no one understanding that he was dealing with an abusive father, and he wouldn't allow anybody to abuse us, but that generational curse, he abused his women. So in order to break the cycle, you have to provide the resources. Without the resources, they're just setting us up for failure. And we need to make sure those resources flood in our community. And
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think I needed to say that in memory of my brother.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're honoring him. every day,
Yeah.
and yourself.
Yeah. It's a healing process.
Yeah. Thank you
And
for
you don't
that.
have to be a part of the program to get the therapy. That's phenomenal. Phenomenal thing about the organization that I joined.
That is not common. Yeah, that
Yes,
is not
do
common.
not.
Usually you
They
have
give
to be
us
part of the program for
vouchers.
that.
Yes. So if you need therapy and you came out of prison or you're struggling, you don't have to be a part of the organization. You could just reach out to me and we'll reach out to them and they connect you with a therapist and someone that looks like you. Yeah. So I'm just
That's
excited
excellent.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's, even the therapy services, that's not something that's offered in every reentry program.
Right.
And that is, yeah, that's
Girl, I was
huge.
praying. I needed that because we were paying for therapy. And I want to do a shout out to Resilience on Instagram. That guy, he did not charge me a lot when I had to get therapy services for a participant of ours. So I really do appreciate him. I'm hoping he's on this list, but I have to shout out to him because he was phenomenal. He even did therapy for my son. So yes, and he did not charge a lot.
That's
So I
excellent.
appreciate him for that. Very reasonable.
Yeah. There are so many therapists who are unsung heroes, truly.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
so many of them they recognize because we need
Mhm.
more folks who look like us to be in this. And it's heavy. That's
Mhm.
some heavy work,
Mhm.
but I know a lot of them who aren't just they have sliding scales, but a lot of them who are doing providing therapy services for free. They know the need is great.
Right.
It's just I mean, but it takes the collective.
It does.
We
It really
all
does.
have our part to play.
And his
You're the work that you're doing,
I want to give
huge part
his
of it.
name because he is
Yes.
resilience, but his name is Dr. Damian J. Thomas. Resilience.
Thomas.
I had to look up his name for his. I was like, I like the name of your organization, Resilient.
Okay. That's great. Yes, I will. Thank you for looking that up for me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because I'm going to go back and watch and make sure I capture write down every organization because you have shared a lot of resources,
I
and so
appreciate
that I can include those links in there for folks. Um, wow, I'm so glad we got to meet, like even
I am.
virtually. So
I am
thank
too.
you.
Thank
And so, what
you.
part of I know I looked at the website. What part of Mississippi is Paroled2Pride located in? Like, are you near
In Columbus,
Columbus?
Lowndes County.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I know somebody
Yes.
absolutely amazing who lives in Columbus. So, yeah, I'll have to definitely
Yeah.
bring y'all to her
Yeah.
attention.
Yes.
So,
Thank you
yes, is
so
there
much.
anything you'd like to share before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. Thank you for this platform because it raises awareness not only for me but everybody that you have on your platform. So that is a gift that God gives people, and you're a great host.
Oh, thank you.
Sincere, you can feel that in your
Thank
spirit. Yes, you
you.
are. I was very comfortable. Normally, I am nervous, but you made me very comfortable. So I appreciate
Thank you. I feel like I have a lot of divine connections
it.
because when you run across and you meet people, you never know. I mean, you just don't know how they'll
Mhm.
receive you or talk to you. And people are so caught up, especially like with social media, if they don't know you and you're not a big brand or a big
Right,
name
right.
and everything. And so I'm always nervous when I reach out to people
Yeah.
too. And you were extremely gracious and and I tell like it's important to me to show Black women
Hmm.
supporting one another as
Yes.
well. And I have Black men on the show as well, but
Yeah.
I mentioned Black women because our relationships are so important.
Right.
And people try to say Black women can't get along and all this stuff. And it's like, nah,
Not true.
that's a lot of trauma stuff,
Right.
that people want to feed. But
Right.
we need these relationships. The sisterhood is
Yes.
crucial.
Yes. Yes.
I can't win if you not
That's
winning.
right.
Like, and winning means so many things. I'm not
Right.
talking about money. I'm talking about like us healing on our
Right.
healing journeys
Yeah.
because we all healing from something,
Hmm.
some things,
Yes.
some things.
Yes. We are.
Yeah.
That's true. So
So I
thank
appreciate you and
you.
um, Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just thank you.
You're welcome.
You are such a light. Like some people just glow from the inside out.
Thank
And
you.
so I can see the peace. Like you're covered in your peace and your healing.
Yeah.
And you see that. And
Hmm.
that's what I want to see for everybody, especially these kids, because
Yes.
so
Hmm.
many of them don't have that.
Right.
So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
So yeah. So this is She Confidential podcast. Everybody, the links for Parole to Pride and Sharon Jones will be all in the description box. So thank you.
Thank you.